Hey everyone, welcome to another Power Monkey podcast. On today's episode, Chad and I interview Michael Schaeffer. Michael is one of the co-founders of the incredibly successful and rising brands NOBULL. It was great to talk to Michael, get a little bit of a background on where he came from, coming in from Europe to the States many years ago, working for some other big brands within the sports world between Puma and Reebok, and then eventually starting his own brand from scratch, and then seeing that come to fruition, some of the challenges and tribulations that go along with starting from something from scratch like this. I love hearing from someone like Michael too, who comes from a creative background and is able to impart his technical understanding of what's going on in the same way that Chad and I really like to talk about technique when it comes to movement. There are definitely some synergy, definitely some interesting ways that technique can be applied to both things. I hope you guys enjoy this one. I know I did. I'm a big fan of NOBULL's products, and it was great to talk with Michael. Enjoy. All right, Michael, how you doing? It's good to have you on the show. I appreciate you taking the time.
Good. Thanks for having me. Awesome meeting you guys.
Where are you coming in from?
Vermont.
Oh, Vermont.
It's snowing outside. We're just waiting for it to get enough snow so we can actually get up on the mountain.
Amazing. Is this a little vacation? Are you taking some time to?
No, actually permanent move. So with COVID, I think we reassessed everything, and Marcus and I, my business partner and I, talked about this for a long time, and we don't know when our office is going to open up full time, obviously. So for the time being, we're up here. Most likely it's going to be a forever decision, and Boston is close enough for me to commute back down to. So I definitely miss hanging out with the gang. Zoom meetings are good, but it's not the same.
Absolutely. So the business is still set up in Boston. Marcus is still there. Your partner will be there, and you'll work remotely and kind of travel back and forth as needed.
Yep, exactly.
Wow. COVID has definitely changed quite a bit. And it's good to see that, people are adjusting and amending and making things work as needed. But amazing. I've heard great things about Vermont. So hopefully that snow piles up a little bit for you. You can enjoy it a little bit.
It's a good place if you like skiing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to touch a little bit just about your background. And, you're a very creative guy. And we want to jump into the creative side a little bit in terms of how you approach that to NOBULL. But can you give us a little bit of a background and where you come from and how you kind of got to the point of where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm originally from Austria. You can tell I'm definitely not from Boston. Been in the States since 95. So went from Austria with an engineering degree to Japan for 2 years. Ended up in grad school in Brooklyn, New York, at Pratt Institute. Thought I was going to be in New York for 2 years and then head back to Austria or Germany to work as a car designer, and got sucked into the footwear and apparel industry and ended up working at Reebok. That was my first job out of college here in the States. Then went on to N1 basketball, Puma, Reebok again, and that's where I met Marcus, my good friend and now business partner. And then we were scheming for a couple of years trying to figure out how to start something, and that's how NOBULL was born.
Wow. So the intention was to go and work for a car company and do car design. And then you said sucked into the shoe industry by Reebok. How did that come about? And was it a transition that you were looking forward to go from potentially cars onto shoes?
Yeah, so I'm not the funny thing is I'm not a shoe geek at all. Like I hadn't been a sneaker geek at all. I didn't even know that you could be a shoe designer, quite honestly. I was at Pratt to study product design, but then with a specialization on transportation design. Had a job offer from Audi, but they wanted me to go back to Germany, and I wanted to stay in the States for a little bit. So a friend of mine who I went to school with ended up as a shoe designer, and he said, "Hey, just come up to Reebok for an interview. They're looking for some people." And I was like, "Shoe design, dude? I don't know." It's like it just wasn't glamorous, right? I was like, "What, I'm gonna design shoes? I want to do cars. It's cool and big." But I've always been an athlete. My parents were both physical education teachers, so I grew up with them, kind of taking us for workouts all the time and being active. So when I went to Reebok, then I spent 2 days there. That was in the late 90s. I just got hooked by the environment. All the designers were active. During lunch breaks, they were going outside, mountain biking, trail running. This was way before CrossFit, right? But everybody was active and was a designer. And it was a really laid back atmosphere, very different from kind of the German corporate culture, car design, suit, aluminum briefcase.
Sure.
So it was just more me, and I immediately got hooked. My dad was not pumped. He was, he was like, "What, are you going to throw your career away and design shoes now?" But it was a good decision.
And so basically from there, you bounced around back and forth, went to a few different companies, and then made your way back to Reebok. And at what period did you end up finding, like, did CrossFit come into the mix? At what point did CrossFit and your relationship with Marcus, and then was that a transition at all in terms of how you started to approach shoemaking, or did that kind of lend itself to this idea of maybe NOBULL being an actual possibility?
Yeah, so Marcus and I met in 2005. That's where we were on a team together, actually, to revitalize the pump, which I still think is an technology. So that was our gig. And then a half year after that, Adidas acquired Reebok, and all the teams got blown up. So Marcus stayed on for another year or so after that, but we didn't work on the same team anymore. He got promoted out of the whole thing to head of brand strategy. I got promoted to creative director. But CrossFit, the conversations didn't start, I think, until 2010. So that's kind of when it was brewing internally before Reebok went public with that. And, started creating a CrossFit box at Reebok, brought coaches in, and just got used to kind of, what CrossFit was and what you needed for it from an equipment perspective. And we all immediately got hooked. Like everybody that worked there, it was just so much more fun than just going to the gym and, doing your 3 sets of 10. I was a gymnast growing up. So for me, I was in heaven, even in my old days, to do handstand walks again and rope climbs. It was just fun. So with that changed the way we looked at product, right? Obviously, very different requirements for especially footwear, doing CrossFit workouts versus just going to a normal gym.
And you had a hand directly in creating the Nano, is that correct?
Yeah, not me personally. So I'm not taking credit for the actual design, but I was the creative director. So I oversaw all product creation for Reebok globally. So the team was working on that. But, I was part in reviews and decision making, but I didn't actually draw the shoe. I honestly don't even remember who that was. But a lot of talented people there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Michael, you're working for Reebok and you worked for a few other different apparel companies, as you mentioned. What was the greatest motivator to really take a step towards doing your own thing? Is it something that you always wanted to own your own business, or was there some other factor involved there?
There were a couple, yeah. So the most important one actually was meeting Marcus. And we always talk about that because I think there's a lot of great ideas out there, a lot of great potential brands, but a lot of them fail because the founders just don't click, right? And then once you become more successful or not successful, right? Once you have starting to have issues, it's hard to weather that stuff if you don't have a good relationship. So as soon as we met, I was at Puma and I interviewed at Reebok, and Marcus was one of the people that interviewed me. And I just immediately knew that there was something there. It's like, certain people, when you meet them, there's just an immediate level of respect and trust, and it was mutual. So that started us having these conversations. We would meet after he left every couple of months, had a barbecue, started talking about, hey, what if we ever built something ourselves, right? And this was not about NOBULL. That idea came very late. It was just about doing something. And I think that was one reason. The other one was I went to design school because I was pumped about creating, right? Being getting my hands dirty and actually, sketching and developing product and being really involved in the process. In big corporations like Reebok, once you get to a certain level, you're not that creative anymore. I mean, you can manage creativity, right? And you manage people, but the politics and the people management took over the creative side. And I realized at some point that, I was looking back on a Friday afternoon sometimes. I'm like, what did I actually do the whole week that was creative, other than hanging out with the design team and brainstorming a little bit? It was just meetings after meetings after meetings. So I had kind of lost I didn't lose the love for design, but I wanted to get back to it, right? I wanted to get back to really designing myself. So that was a big trigger as well.
Yeah, very, very understandable. When you're held back from doing what you're most passionate about, you're not going to be happy. So certainly taking a step to make those changes, I can see was very important for you. And what was the first step that you guys had to take when you made the decision to, hey, let's step aside and create this new line of products, this new company? What was the first step you guys had to take?
So the first step was actually we created a cold water surf brand. Believe it or not, it hadn't. Again, there was no talk about NOBULL, no talk about a footwear and apparel brand. I was a passionate and still am a passionate cold water surfer. So really got into surfing more and more around the Boston area after we moved there. And the waves are usually good. They're good in the fall sometimes with hurricane season, but they're very good sometimes in the winter, and it's freaking cold out there. And at the time, that was 2011 when we started talking about the idea, there weren't a lot of brands catering to that community globally. Now, since then, it's grown. It's not as niche anymore. Equipment has gotten better. Surf, wetsuits have gotten better. But at the time, we saw an opportunity there. We were completely naive. We had never, worked in the surf industry, never started a brand, and we just jumped right in, and we had no idea. And being naive and a little bit, willing to take that risk actually, I think, helped us a lot in making that initial jump, right? Because we just didn't know better. We thought we're just going to create some product, start selling it, grow, right? Pay the bills. And it was a grind. We were like happy when we got an order from a surf shop, a local surf shop for, I think our first order was $700, right? I remember going in the parking lot, taking a picture of the check that we had just gotten, emailed it to Marcus. We got on the phone. We were pumped. We framed the check. It was like the first kind of milestone, right?
Yeah.
But it's a tough industry to get into, especially if you're an outsider. So to keep the bills on while we were building that, people started seeing our website, which we had created. We didn't have money to outsource that. I did all the photography and the videos. So we got clients that were interested in similar things, right? Some startups, some big brands. Can you help us with design? Can you help us with marketing? Can you help us with, content? And in some stuff we were dabbling in it, but people saw, they liked what they saw for that brand, and they had trust in us being able to do the same for them. So that helped a lot in kind of getting us through the first couple of years. And then the idea for NOBULL really started in 2013. That's when we were like, you know what? We both CrossFit. We come from the industry. Why would we not create a brand that we actually could use, but also that we know a lot about in terms of the community? So that's when kind of the first ideas about NOBULL started being created. We had no idea about the name at the time. That came very late, actually, and just started looking into where we could make the stuff, who could help us, and things like that.
I'm curious about something you mentioned, cold water surfing.
Yeah.
And that this is a passion for yourself. Like, I'm sorry, just to bring it back to that, because it kind of stuck. Do you actively seek out locations that are cold water, or do you just live in a location with cold water and you like surfing? You're like, hey, I'm a cold water surfer because I'm here.
Yeah, that was it for me. Don't get me wrong. I like surfing in Southern California, even though people think it's cold there, right? When I'm there in the summer, I'm in board shorts and a rash guard because it's warm for me. So it's not like that I was seeking it out. It was because I lived there. And that's true for a lot of people. There's a lot of people in Alaska surfing and they just happen to live there. But there is a certain solitude and connection to nature coming with that you don't get when you're at a populated break in the summer, where you have 100 people competing for one break. So because it thins out the crowds, right? Not everybody's into it. Not everybody's willing to walk through 2-3 feet of snow from the parking lot to get to the water and then change out of it. It's a very different feeling, but you really earn it. It feels a little bit more like CrossFit in that respect. Like you have to be a little nuts. It's not pretty, but it's definitely a very rewarding experience. So that's what sucked me into it.
I love it. I love that. I grew up on the East Coast as well, surfing in New Jersey. Same thing, fall hurricane season into that winter is when you get the best waves. I wouldn't say that I was a winter surfer. I didn't quite have the courage you did getting out there in the winter weather, but you always see people out there. And now
Oh, yeah.
living in Portland as well, whenever I go to the coast, there's guys out there all year. You know, that weather, that water on the Pacific, North Pacific water, it's freezing cold.
Yeah.
People are out there all the time. Always curious, like, what gets somebody out there in that kind of weather? But I get it. I guess it's that solitude that helps.
Yep.
Yeah, and Michael, you were saying that, you know, when you guys got started, perhaps you wouldn't have taken that step if you knew certain things, right? So, and I think that's where a lot of success really comes from is ignorance, right? So just not knowing. So you go in a little bit more blindly, and you get to the point to where there's no turning back. You've got to do something and make things happen. And it sounds like that's kind of where your story was. And, you know, when you guys transitioned into NOBULL and said, okay, NOBULL is this brand and this company that we're going to make, what was your first initial big challenge that you guys faced to really get things up and running? And is there anything that you know now that you wish you would have known then and done differently?
That's a really good question. I don't know if we would have done things differently. So the most important thing is that we are self-funded. So we had no investors when we started. And we put everything on the line, right? So I'm not the youngest anymore, 3 kids in school. Marcus has 2 daughters. And we have mortgages, you know, and we were like, we're going to make it through, right? And it got close to rock bottom a couple of times, especially, you know, those years when we were building NOBULL. If it wasn't for our relationship, I think we would have, one of us at certain times would have failed because of, you know, sanity checks with the family and being like, hey, is this really worth it? Do we really want to put everything on the line? Because it started with, you know, just writing some small checks for some first kind of prototypes and things like that. But then once it became closer to launching, the checks got bigger and bigger, right? Ramping up for production, making all the molds. And those were, first there were savings accounts, then they were empty. Then it was a second mortgage, right? So when you start doing that, and we believed in it, but we had no idea what it was going to work out. We drained everything. So that was number one. I don't know if I would change it. The funny thing is I'm not a gambler. Like I just don't like gambling. I'm very German in that respect, probably. I like things to be planned and organized and everything. So it's not really my nature, but I think again, the relationship helped a lot there with Marcus. The other thing was, we didn't really want to use any relationships that we had from previous jobs because obviously it was a little sensitive, right? I had worked at Reebok for a long time. Reebok is still a partner with CrossFit, and all of a sudden we were creating a competitive brand. Now, very small, for sure, but definitely, you know, a competitor. So it didn't feel right to reach out to even people that we were friends with and say, hey, can you, make this connection with me to this factory or this person? So we literally Googled everything. Like we started from scratch. And the funny thing was nobody cared what we had done before, right? Nobody cared that I had been creative director at Reebok for 7 years.
Right.
The factories are like, yeah, but you're a new brand. And, we have had a lot of new brands start with us and we work with them for a season and then they go out of business. So why would we trust you guys, right?
Right.
So that was a grind, like researching that, trying to figure out who to work with. And we found a great partner that we're still with, but it took a lot of work to actually get them to give us a chance. And that was a very humbling experience.
Persistence, right? You had to be very persistent, and I think that's the way with anything. You're trying to get it going, and I've experienced the same thing in many cases, running a business. And Dave, I'm sure you can relate to this as well, is that 2-time Olympian doesn't really mean a whole lot. You've got to know a lot of other things and develop a lot of other skills. And I think the difference is, as you mentioned, Michael, just sticking with it. And finding those people that will allow you in the door a little bit and just keep taking steps. So my hat goes off to you for making that happen, because it would be very easy. And I know it is very easy to just throw your hands up and, step to the side and go do something else. Yeah.
You also can't have an ego, right? I think you have to check your ego at the door. Same as when you walk into a CrossFit box. And you're not too good for anything, right?
Right.
Again, we paid for everything with our own money, so we couldn't hire a photographer. Right? I'm not a trained photographer, but I created all the photography for the first couple of months when we launched the brand, and It was in my garage with a broomstick and a reflector that I bought. I didn't have lighting, couldn't afford
Nice.
lighting, so I had to time it with the sunlight coming in at the right time. So it was crazy, but we loved it. It was awesome. It was awesome to go through all these steps and learn a lot of things along the way.
It seems like the Boston, Vermont area has had a lot of influence within the CrossFit community, with
Mm-hmm.
you guys and with Fraser being from there, and
Yeah.
with Bergeron and with Loud and Live and O'Keefe. And it seems like a lot of you guys have collaborated on a bunch of projects. Do you feel like that location being connected to so many people within the CrossFit community that touch on so many different areas has been helpful?
Definitely, absolutely. I think, I don't know why that is. I mean, Boston definitely is a tech hub, right? More and more. Whoop is based in Boston as well. A little
Mm-hmm.
shout out there, and we're good friends with them. So
Oh, yeah.
there's a lot of stuff going on there's a lot of stuff going on in Boston. It definitely makes it easier, especially in the beginning, right? When you're not able to travel a lot for business and make these connections on a more, national or global level. It was convenient to have a lot of people close by. I remember I did kind of an OCR race. What was that? 2015 or so. I think it was up in Vermont actually. And Fraser was running it. I didn't know him yet personally at the time, but he was running in the same heat that I was running, which was fun.
Oh, yeah.
And he lives only, I think, half an hour away from us now. So at some point, gonna hook up for barbecue or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a good guy.
Absolutely. We've had him out to our Power Monkey camp a few times, and same with Bergeron. And, it's just, such great minds all working together on a goal of just being better, right? Within a particular industry. It's just nice to surround yourself with people like that. And I just found it to be interesting that you guys are all kind of based in the same area and have all kind of touched each other in certain areas in terms of your businesses.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Can I bring up another thing that you mentioned before that I've been interested in? You mentioned you were a gymnast.
Yeah.
And I heard that and I was like, wait a second. So first, I've been to Austria before. I was friends with a lot of guys in the Austrian gymnastics team. I went to go visit them and stayed in Innsbruck for a while and
cool.
And trained at their training center and things like that. And I'm just curious kind of what level you took it to and when you started and how much of a part of your athletic career gymnastics has been.
Not to a very high level. So my thing is I'm not good at any sport, but I do a shit ton of different sports. I just love that. I never had the desire to focus on one thing. And maybe that's my upbringing with my parents. We always did everything, right? So I grew up snowboarding and skiing, mountain biking and triathlons, road cycling. I never ranked high in any sport, but I was always active and always trying new things. And that's more fun for me, right? I totally get why people become competitive in a sport, and it's also a DNA thing. And if you're predisposed to make it to the Olympics in a certain sport, absolutely. But that wasn't true for me. So I just had fun doing a lot of things. So I think so I did gymnastics for a long time from age 3, which was, just tumbling around, but it did kind of create the foundation for a lot of other sports. I think it was extremely beneficial for me for doing all the other stuff that I'm doing now to have that upbringing. So I stopped when I was 14 to do it. I did it a couple times a week. And I think my best ranking on a national level, and I still remember that because it was humbling, I think it came in 42nd.
All right.
There were probably only 43 people competing in my age group. I don't think I was last, but I didn't, I didn't do that well.
I love it. I love it. Gymnastics background, I'm all about that. Is an active lifestyle pretty prevalent within the Austrian culture? Just sports in general, being outdoors, skiing, snowboarding. It seems like when I was there, it was very noticeable that was kind of just part of everyday life. Is that true?
Yeah, 100%. And, obviously there's outliers, but I think in general, if you look at the population, it's just ingrained in you, right? The outdoors is so accessible. There's no real big cities other than Vienna, which that's a huge metropolis. But other than that, and even from Vienna, within 15 minutes, you're in a forest where you can mountain bike and rock climb, right? So it's very easy to get to places, and a lot of the places are very dramatic, right? So the Alps go up to whatever 12,000-13,000 feet, and from my hometown Salzburg, I could ski in 5-6 different ski areas within a 20-minute drive. So it's definitely part of culture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I have more stories of Innsbruck, probably not for this podcast, but
oh, come on.
I went skiing for my first time out there, and it didn't end so well. But
Mm.
I had a great time. It's an absolute beautiful, beautiful place, and I can't wait to go back over there. But it's just very noticeable how active everyone was when I was out there last time, for sure.
Yep.
Well, now is that the ski story that led you into coaching, Dave? So,
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
Definitely probably a story for another podcast. And Austria is definitely a place that I've never been, but always wanted to go. So I need to get there at some point, if we can ever travel again too much. I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen. But I wanted to talk a little bit now about the better and more important sport of weightlifting. I'm not sure if you'll agree with that, Michael, but your weightlifting shoe, I remember seeing that for the first time, and I think that may have been my introduction to NOBULL. I saw this shoe that was this weightlifting shoe that was beautiful. I mean, literally when I first saw it, I was like, wow, that's probably the prettiest weightlifting shoe that I've ever seen. And then obviously dig into it a little bit and see what brand it is. And again, it's a brand that I've never heard of. But again, I just pulled up some of those a page with all of your weightlifting shoes on them. And I love them. I mean, the look, to be honest, I've never tried them yet. So I don't know how they feel or how they fit or anything else like that. But certainly the look of them are very unique. And again, to me, they're beautiful. Where did you guys first decide that you needed to make a weightlifting shoe, and what went into the process of that design?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started with the trainer. That was our first shoe, the Superfabric trainer. And right around when we launched, right, we got connected to a lot of the athletes that are still with us, right? Sam Dancer, Jared Stevens, Brooke Wells. Like it was just an amazing start for the brand, because we didn't want to force like having relationships with athletes. All of these happened organically. Like we met them through friends in the community. All of a sudden we were talking with Sam Dancer. It was like a half-year-long courtship. He ripped our shoes apart. That's just when we launched. And he was like, I don't know about you guys yet. I want to make sure I like you as people, and I want to make sure I'm confident about using the product. And that was awesome, right? He gave us so much good feedback in the beginning. But quickly out of that conversation, to your question, became the urge to also have a lifting shoe. Now it took us a while then to actually develop it, make sure it's right, work with the athletes again to make sure that they feel right using it. Everything that we do, we test in-house first. And in-house in the beginning meant Marcus and Todd and I. Those were kind of the three OGs that were part of it in the beginning. Ben helped out, Ben Bergeron, obviously. We used his CrossFit box a lot also for testing when we couldn't reveal things to the public yet. And but then it was always the best moment was always when we took it away from our own team and then moved it over to some athletes that were at games level to see how they perform in the product and what feedback do they have. So the way we design is really, and that's honestly, that's where the name came from. We had the idea for the brand, we had the product design before we had the name. And the way we approached everything and still are approaching everything was trying to get rid of all the gimmicks in product, right? And that's one thing that was fed up about a lot of the other, technologies, sort of pseudo technologies that are out there, where companies are promising consumers that a certain product is going to make them fitter, or they have to work less hard to become as fit, right? I'm like, well, that's not really the point, right? The point is for you to work out hard, and the product should help you along the way and shouldn't fall apart and should feel good, but it shouldn't do the work for you. I think those are, it's like, that's not us, right? And that's not for everyone, but that's the stand that we made in the beginning, and we strongly believe that you got to put the work in. The product is not going to do it for you. And when you look at it that way, product becomes very simple. right? It doesn't mean that you don't have technology in it, but you can get rid of a lot of the stuff that doesn't really do anything. So that's how we ended up with the super fabric trainer, which is literally one piece of material and then the midsole and the outsole. Now there's lining in it and a heel counter, but we don't have a lot of like steps and overlays and, this zone does this and that zone does that, because that creates pressure points. It creates potential, areas where the product can fall apart. So we found this fabric that we're still using, super fabric, that we don't make, but we source it from another company that did all of what we needed it to do for CrossFit. So that's how we started working on that shoe. And then the same with the lifter. We looked at some of the lifters that were out there, and that they felt like they were, spaceships or there were just too many things on there that you didn't really need. So we went back to the basics and said, okay, you need a stable platform, right? You need lateral support. You need to be able to really tie your foot down into the, the midfoot heel area. And other than that, there's not a lot of, other things that you have to build into it. They have to be comfortable. And that's what led to that design. So it's a good filter for us for every product that we create to design into. If we can strip it away and we don't need it, then we do that and we take it away.
I love that simplification. That's what we try to do as coaches all the time and teachers, is keep things simple, get rid of stuff that we say that just filler and unnecessary, and get to the point. And that's not always easy to do. I mean, I'm constantly having to do that as I'm writing and stuff like that. I've got to filter those things out, and it sounds very much the same as the way you guys do in design. And I'm excited to hear that. It's the design came from not necessarily the way that it looked, but the function of it. I love that.
Which makes it very hard to design a new product, because if you're true to that ethos, right, on every product that you create after that first one, the first question is, why are you creating a new one if the old one works, right? And it took us a long time to go from the first iteration of the super fabric trainer to the second one. Actually, it wasn't that first step wasn't that long. It was a year, I think. And the only reason we updated it was because we found out that there were some weak points. And we didn't notice those because I don't deadlift, 620 pounds. But somebody that does all of a sudden ripped the shoe apart in areas where we thought there wasn't any issue. So that learning triggered us to create an updated version of the first super fabric trainer that almost looks the same if you look at it from 30 feet away. But a lot of stuff had gotten updated. And that's the only reason we updated it. So that second iteration we launched in 2016, and we are now working on an update to that, but we have been working on an update for over 2 years, because we only want to launch it when we know that we can actually make it better. And better means, we can't sacrifice abrasion resistance. It can't be less flexible. It can't be heavier, right? It needs to be as durable. So if you try to do all these things, it gets really, really hard to update something other than just for the sake of updating it, right? Which is kind of what the industry does. It's like, okay, 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and it's like it's almost on a timed cycle. But why, if it works?
So it seems like the lineup that you have within the NOBULL shoe lineup basically encompasses everything that a CrossFitter might need. You have your trainer that you started out with, you have your runners, and you have your lifters, you have a cycling shoe now. Is the intention to stay within the functional fitness in the CrossFit world, or do you have intentions to branch out outside of this kind of little micro fitness world that you guys started within? So
definitely, we see ourselves as a training brand, right? And training, you can define that as something very narrow, but you can also say, every athlete for any sport trains, right? Maybe not everyone goes into a weight room and lifts weights, absolutely, but there's a broader definition to training, right? It's not just CrossFit, it's not just the weight room, it's not just your normal gym. People train in all different ways. So for us, it's more a mindset over a category. Now, we're always going to stay true to the functional training world, to CrossFit, whatever CrossFit might become, right, over the next 10 years, because that's where we came from and that's what we are passionate about. But to your point about running, at some point, when we were ready for that, obviously people that CrossFit also run during CrossFit workouts, but also run on the weekend, right? And they might not even do a CrossFit workout. They go for a run. They run with friends that don't CrossFit. Mm-hmm. And that's how all of a sudden our product was being picked up by people that had never heard of CrossFit, never heard of us as a brand. They're like, hey, what are you running with, right? So without really marketing to the running community, running has become a really meaningful part of the business over the last couple of years, just by association, with people that CrossFit and run, and then their friends that might not necessarily go to a box. So we are definitely working on more categories. It's not about the actual sport. It's more about the mindset and design ethos behind it. And are we going to have a cricket shoe at some point soon? Probably not. But if you there's certain categories that are closer to what we stand for, that feels more organic for us to expand into now versus other categories that might take a little bit longer.
Now, on the design side as well, you can spot a NOBULL shoe from the other side of the room. You can see what it looks like. I've always been able to say, it's very distinct. And I think it's a beautiful shoe. I think your whole lineup, they're very distinct, they're unique, they're creative. And I'm just curious for you, being a creative director and kind of in charge of the design side of it, how important is this balance between design and function? For you, is it an equal match? Or as a design side, do you say, no, I need this to look a particular way and function will be important, but for me as the creative designer, that's going to be my priority?
Great question. I would absolutely say function first, but it has to look good, right?
Yeah.
And there's two reasons for that. One is people just don't want to wear ugly stuff, right? And the definition of ugly and what looks good and doesn't look good is obviously a very personal one, right? Mm-hmm. And I know that we are not designing product that everybody likes, and that's fine. I'd rather be black or white versus being kind of in the vanilla gray zone where, you're not really sure what the brand stands for and you dabble in everything a little bit. So that's okay. Even just by definition of giving our brand the name NOBULL, not everybody wants to wear something with NOBULL on the product, right? That's not for everyone. That's okay. But so function is always first, and that's what I was trying to explain before with the next iteration of the Super Fabric Trainer. We could have made another beautiful shoe 3 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. That's an update for that, but we couldn't figure out how to make it better. And if we can't figure that out, we're not going to launch it, even if it looks better, because it's not what we're about, if that makes sense. Now, from where we bring a lot of creativity in also is, through colors and graphics and stories. And we are very connected between product and content and pride ourselves in that. I think a lot of big companies outsource marketing when it comes to advertising campaigns. And I've experienced that a lot, right? And sometimes that works well, but other times there's a disconnect between the product and the product philosophy, and then some agency coming in and taking over after the product was created to say, hey, what are we going to do now? How are we going to talk Jared's Floral Shop. We're sitting around a table from the beginning talking about, okay, what is this going to look like when we actually show our customers, right? What's the experience? What's the feel? And that triggers how content executes photography and videos, but also how we design the product. So that we definitely have some fun there, right? It's not just all about function. We have fun with the floral prints and other print stories that we've done in collaborations. We did artwork. I don't know if you've seen that. There've been a couple of iterations now of that. The first one, I think, was in 2017, where we rented out the floor of this old factory north of Boston. Had our athletes come in with Kent Youngstrom, who is a super talented painter and artist out of North Carolina, but he's also a CrossFitter. And he sent us some samples of what he had done when he put paint on his body and on his equipment, and he was working out. So that was his idea. And the canvases were beautiful. We had no idea who he was. So we connected with him. he orchestrated the workout with them, and the product that came out of that was very, very different, right? Like Christy Aramo had her own shoe, Sam Dancer had his own shoe, and it was really creative through them and the way they worked out on the canvas. So we had these strips of canvas laid out, they had paint everywhere, and they were just doing CrossFit movements. And it was a real cool process to go through, which created content, created a lot of fun for the team that was involved in it. Mm-hmm. And then we had a gallery opening in London where we launched the product, but also then auctioned off the original canvases and donated the proceeds for a cause. So the whole package was just really, connected and authentic, and I think people appreciated that when they saw the final product. So that's kind of the look side of it, right?
Sure.
We definitely try to be creative as well.
Yeah, and coming back to what I mentioned earlier, like you can notice a NOBULL shoe right away. Like when you come out with a new one, it's like, that's a NOBULL shoe. You can tell that it's something a little bit unique, a little bit different that's out there. And you can see the artistic component to it. And I kind of gravitate towards that kind of shoe, that kind of product. So it always I'm always interested when you guys launch something new because it's always so unique. So kudos to you guys for being so kind of different to your approach when it comes to what you're putting out. Do you feel like now that you guys have your own brand, smaller than working for a big Reebok and Puma and things like that, it allows yourself to be nimble when it comes to being creative? Having spoken to companies like Nike and Reebok and things like that, it's so big and so bureaucratic and so many levels of, checking off boxes and approval for this and that it doesn't allow you to kind of have your full creativity come forward because of those different levels. Do you feel like now you can actually express yourself in the way that you would want to?
Oh, 100%. A huge difference. And this is going to be one of our challenges when we grow, right? Those layers, the bureaucracy, and trying to prevent that from happening. With a lot of big companies, there's a lot of insecurity, right? The bigger you get, the less risk one particular individual wants to take, right? Mm-hmm. So you do a lot of research, ask a lot of people, you work with markets, countries, everybody has a say in it, which is they're all good intentions. I know why the temptation to do that is there. You want to have backup, you want to, show consumers and ask them, what do you think? But it comes out of insecurity, right? And the not being willing to take risks anymore. And I'm sure when Reebok was very small, when Paul Fireman started, right, that I'm sure he was a risk taker, and a lot of things happened very quickly and were very creative. But the bigger you get, not for every company, but a lot of companies then have these layers, and creativity just suffers a little bit. So for us, we don't have that, right? We do have a hierarchy. Obviously, we have people that just out of school. We have interns working with us. I'm a little bit on the older side and have a lot of experience. But we say everybody in our company has a voice, but not everybody gets to make the decision, right? And that's how we approach it. So we want everybody to really say, from a design perspective or from any other aspect of business, what they're thinking. Every opinion is valuable. If we can't come to an agreement, then in the end, Marcus and I have to make the decision. But we work very quickly. We don't second guess ourselves. We launch product when we're proud of it, not when it's perfect. And there's a big difference between that, because if you try to make something perfect, you're never going to launch, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So if we are at a point where we say, you know what, we're proud of this, and we're excited to put this out there and share it, because we've tested it, it works, it looks good, all the things that we talked about, then we launch it. And if there are issues and customers have issues and athletes have feedback, then we address it and we learn from it and we try to make the next one better. But we don't dwell on anything, right? We just keep moving. And that's the mindset that everybody has on the team, which comes, it makes people feel very able to make decisions. They trust their instincts. And it helps us work much faster.
Yeah, it's crazy how much being a perfectionist is an incredible strength, but an incredible weakness as well. I think so many of us fall into that trap, and there's been so many delays on stuff that I've done, and even stuff pushed to the side just because it wasn't what I thought it could or should be. And along with being humbled running a business, I think the longer you run a business, and for me too, perfectionism is being beaten out of me. So I think that's a great thing, and a great point that you make there. Now, um, we talked about weightlifting and running and CrossFit. And of course, creating shoes for those specific tasks, you have to have at least a base understanding of the movement and what you're trying to accomplish with that. And I wonder, is there anything that, as a byproduct you guys have learned, or anything of note that you can point to that was maybe the most interesting thing that you learned that you didn't know before from developing, say, a weightlifting shoe or in running?
That's a great question. So the beauty of the sports that we've gone into, or the categories that we've gone into so far that are public now, is that most people on the team that we have now participate in all the sports. And team also including the athletes, obviously. We consider them as part of the team. But even the Boston office, we have tons of people that do CrossFit, tons of people that run, tons of people that do cycling, indoor, outdoor, right? So it was easy for us to get a good understanding of what the functional requirements are, and also test early prototypes and get a good first read, right? Now, none of us are at a level where we are competitive in Olympic lifting, right? So that's where the athletes then come in. So when we go into sports where I personally feel like I don't have anything to offer, yes, I'm an athlete, but I don't participate in that sport, I can't, I need someone else to help us with the functional requirements. We have a good basic understanding in terms of movement and what forces might be applied, but that's all theoretical, right? You have to participate in the sport, and you have to try to rip that thing to pieces, and that's how you're going to find out. So we're working on a lot of categories right now that I can't talk about, but we are associating ourselves with people that are at a very high level in that respective sport to give us feedback that's honest. It's early. We don't have an ego, right? If the feedback says this is crap and you have to change it because it just doesn't work, then that's what we're going to do. So at a certain point, right, the team skill set doesn't encompass everything that we are trying to do anymore. And that's when we have to then work with external people and more athletes that are at a very high level at what they're doing to help us with that. That's really important. Yeah,
the feet being on the ground are the base of so many movements that we do. And it's, just thinking about that as you were talking, I'd be interested to know more even about what goes into making a weightlifting shoe, because there's maybe something I could learn from that. And it's very interesting. And, talking about running and thinking about all those other movements, what a CrossFit coach especially, could learn from, maybe not from developing a shoe. Not everyone's going to create a shoe and develop it, but from just understanding what went into it and why. I think that's very fascinating.
And we learned very quickly that you can't replicate, and I kind of knew that from my previous jobs, but it's very hard to replicate, especially in CrossFit, on a machine, what that product goes through. You can, right? Because, like I said, the first generation in 2015, we had some issues with delamination in certain areas. And we look back at the data from the factory where every shoe got put through, not every shoe that we sell, but every shoe conceptually got put through these machines, right? With like cycle tests, 20,000 cycles on this machine, flex tests, abrasion tests, and all that stuff. They're trying to tear them apart on the machine, and they all passed, right? So it looked good on paper. We worked out with it. It worked. And then as soon as we put them at games level athletes, none of that mattered. Like this, you just can't. You have to have a real world kind of experience with that. Also, people don't always use them the way they intended to be used, right? You can't say, here's the movements that you're supposed to do, because people are just going to do whatever they want in the shoe.
Sure.
And you might not have predicted that.
Well, I hope nobody's running in weightlifting shoes, but
I sure hope not.
Maybe that's for another podcast as well. We get Chris Inshaw on here and tell people
maybe that's why you can't run anywhere, Chad. Maybe that you got to take those weightlifting shoes off if you run further than 400 meters.
Now that you say that, and now that I thought about it, that's absolutely true. I got to wear something other than weightlifting shoes. That's true.
We figured it out.
At least don't feel strike when you run in those.
Yeah. No, to be fair, that's definitely not why I don't like running, Dave. I can tell you that for sure.
Michael, really quickly, on the creative side too, I just am fascinated by the creative side. Where do you draw inspiration from? Outside of the fitness world, where do you draw inspiration in terms of your creativity?
That's interesting. So I'm just a sponge for like anything that goes on in product architecture. I'm a huge architecture fan. Like I almost went into architecture before I decided to go into mechanical engineering. So I have an affinity to really simple kind of building styles, very toned down, very Scandinavian. That's kind of, if you ask me to, and if you look in the background,
Yeah, I
here,
would say even the style of the house you're in right
yeah,
now.
so this is our home, and we were lucky enough to be able to influence what it looks like, and a lot of that influence is visible here, and that it's very similar to what NOBULL stands for. It's really everything that's decorative got pulled out, right? Everything is as flush as possible and simple as possible and straight lines, and I love that. So that's one thing. I'm very influenced by kind of Dieter Rams, who was kind of a Brown, the brand Brown, German, very influential product designer for a really long time. And it's all about simplicity, and it's all about taking everything off and going back to very clean shapes, whether it's circles and straight lines, and there's nothing on that it's decorative. There's nothing on that he couldn't take off, right? And by doing that, a lot of the products coming out of that era and out of that brand are timeless, right? You look at a Razor radio that guy designed like 50, 60, 70 years ago, and you could put it into a store now and it would look awesome because it doesn't follow these like fashion cycles, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what a lot of the designers on our team also stand for. And it's not always easy to do that. There's always a temptation to put something else on. Everybody has the same issue because it's easier.
Yeah, and follow the trends rather than trying to create something classic. So yeah, very, very interesting. I like that.
The one thing I want to add to design is we don't design lifestyle product, right? And that's kind of a dirty word at NOBULL. And what I mean with that, obviously everything is a lifestyle, right? Being an athlete is a lifestyle, but in the industry, lifestyle is usually product that is created to just walk around in, right? And it doesn't have to be functional. You put it on after your workout. We certainly have product like that that people wear, not necessarily for working out, but we design everything for being able to work out, if that makes sense. So everything that we make, from an apparel perspective, from a footwear perspective, we're definitely striving for that to become performance product. Now, how you use it is different, right?
Sure.
We can't dictate that. And because our product is so simple, a lot of people choose to wear it outside the gym, outside the box, not for a run, right? And that's a great side effect of the simplicity that we have, but it's not the reason why we design it that way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, I think you guys have succeeded in that sense at 100%, because I think most people would say, yeah, these are great in the gym, but I can definitely wear these out too. And I've seen you guys wear your shoes to, black tie events. And,
so that's actually a funny story. That goes back to not taking ourselves too serious. We had an Entrepreneur of the Year award ceremony in Boston, and we being NOBULL, and Marcus and I shared the stage with that, were winners for the product segment in the Northeast region of the US, right? So one part of the US, and there's different segments, but we won that. So we needed a shoe, and we could have put on our leather trainers or whatever, but the last didn't feel right for a suit. So literally this was a 3-week project. I didn't tell Marcus about it. We made one other pair for Todd, who has been with us from before the inception of NOBULL. He's our VP of marketing now, an amazing guy. So we made 3 pairs, and I sent a quick hand sketch to a factory, and that's how awesome they are, because they just pulled that, turned it around in no time. And I think we only did 2 rounds of prototypes. We shipped them back and forth, and within 3 weeks we had 3 different sizes. And it's actually a super comfortable dress shoe. But the reason I'm bringing it up is we are very serious overall as a brand, but we also don't take ourselves too serious, right? We have these, from a content perspective, what we do with Jared Stevens as a florist, we always have fun. And we appreciate it as a team because it's our personalities on the team, but I think also people that interact with the brand appreciate that. So you'll see more product like that dress shoe that don't seem to make any sense, but sometimes we just want to have fun and kind of break the cycle a little bit, right? And do things that are very unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, you succeeded there. So congratulations on that. So we're coming towards the end of the podcast here. And we always like to end with a few questions for our guests. If you're up for it, a few last minute questions. First one is an easy one. And I'm hoping that with your background, I know where the answer is going.
Oh, no.
Which sport or discipline do you prefer, weightlifting or gymnastics?
Gymnastics.
Yes.
Oh, no hesitation.
Easy, no hesitation. That's what I like.
I'm just so bad at snatches. Like, you should see my snatch, man. Deadlift, I have pretty good form, but my snatch is absolutely horrible.
Well, let me tell you, Michael, you need to come visit us at Power Monkey Camp and spend some time with me. Maybe I can help you out. And
seriously,
I don't know that I can change your mind completely from gymnastics, but maybe we can, get you headed in that direction at least.
It's much needed. I can guarantee you that. Thanks for the offer.
All right, question number 2. Any guests that you think we would do well to have on the podcast? Anybody you think would be a good guest for us?
From our team or in general?
Anyone in general.
Oh, anyone in general. Whoa. That's a really good question. Alex Honnold.
Absolutely.
And El Capitan. I was talking about him the other day to someone, and that's just insane.
Oh my God.
To do what he did without a rope, right?
Right.
And I think her name is Emily, that just climbed El Capitan, solo as well, but with a rope, right? Which is an amazing accomplishment.
Right.
But for someone to do that without a rope, it's just that the mindfulness that comes with that is unbelievable, aside from the physical feat.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I watched Free Solo again the other day with my daughter because I wanted her to be able to kind of like understand a little bit of what's going on. She keeps talking about wanting to go hiking and camping and things. I was like, we got to go over here and check this out. It's a fascinating story. If you guys have not seen Free Solo, definitely check it out. And I actually think we have Emily lined up for the podcast already.
Oh, cool.
So I think we're going to have her on, and maybe we can somehow finagle our way into an Alex interview as well. But it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, that would be incredible for sure. And I don't know if I could handle that recording, Dave. I mean, what he did is just so unbelievable. And just watching that movie, as I'm sure many people watching, it's terrifying, right? I mean, I love scary movies, but I was probably more scared watching.
And it's like, the ending. You know the ending too.
Right.
You know he's okay.
Still,
and it's still like my hands are sweating.
We watched it with our kids. We were all sitting there with sweaty palms. We're like, we know he'd survive this.
It's unreal.
Right. Well, this next question kind of goes along with that a little bit. And we wonder, do you prefer more reading a book, watching a movie, a documentary, or a TV series?
TV series.
series.
I'm actually not a big reader. I think I'm a little bit dyslexic. It never got diagnosed. One of our kids is, so maybe that's the explanation. I'm not sure. I don't know how I made it to college, but I love visual stuff, and I love also lighthearted things. So that's our ritual every night with the kids. We have 3 boys, 13, 10 and 10, a set of twins. And we always watch a show or 2 shows before we go to bed. It's awesome. It's fun.
Yeah. Us as well. And what TV series is your favorite, or what would you most recommend?
Well, we've watched Friends, I think.
Oh no!
We've watched The Office.
You just made a best friend in Chad.
Yes. I've watched that whole series probably at least 10 times, if not more.
Yeah, we watched it with 8-year-olds, which wasn't probably super appropriate. The same with The Office, not always appropriate. Now we're watching The OC, which I'd never seen, which is it's also like 15 years old or so, and the kids really got into it.
Nice. Well, you know what? Maybe you and I need to get together and play the Friends trivia game one of these days and see who can come out on top there, for sure.
Awesome.
Well, one of the last things that you said there, Michael, is that really hit home with me. You said it's easier to put something extra on the shoe. And it reminded me of something I heard before. This guy sends a note, this long note to somebody. For some reason, I can't even remember the whole story, but he at the beginning of it, he apologizes for the note being so long. He said, because I did not have time to make it shorter.
Hmm.
So that just strikes a chord with me because it's so true. It takes so much effort and time and energy to make things simple enough to where you can get to the point and be more effective. So I just want to say that I really appreciate your time and effort that I know that it takes to make those simple looking designs. And as we mentioned before, Dave said it, I think 2 or 3 times, and I said it 2 or 3 times as well. Your shoes are absolutely beautiful. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. We appreciate you coming on. Do you have any parting words for the listeners?
No, I think that the most important thing for me is that we are just humbled by the support we've gotten from the community pre-COVID, like just growing the brand and how much people love what we are doing, which is just, it's insane. Like having been employed somewhere and then now doing this as a founder with Marcus, it never gets old. And we're so connected with the community through Instagram, right? Personally as well. And I see all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's awesome. I need to see it all. And I absolutely love that. So that's been a really rewarding experience. But even through COVID now, people really support the brand and have helped us make it through that, which was amazing to see. So I just love the connection that I have with our customers, which I never had before,
Right.
working for a multi-billion-dollar brand. So that's super rewarding.
Awesome. Well, to our listeners out there, guys, be sure to check out NOBULL. And if you haven't seen their shoes already, surely you have. But if you haven't, you got to check them out. As we've mentioned before, they're very beautiful. Also, be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Also, check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Ollie Chad. And on behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your host. I'm Chad Vaughn with Dave Durante. Until next time, guys, thank you all for listening.